Welcome into CBS News 24/7. I'm Juliette Goodrich. Here's a look at the four big headlines we're following at 4. Protests outside the Supreme Court as justices hear arguments in a case involving President Trump's fight to end birthright citizenship. Attorneys for Sean Diddy Combs cross-examined his ex-girlfriend Cassie Ventura. The new text messages released about the freak-offs and her relationship with rapper Kid Cudi. Another outage at another major U.S. airport. Pilots lose communication with air traffic controllers for 90 seconds. It's the latest in a series of alarming blackouts nationwide. And you could be paying more for some everyday items. The nation's largest retailer warns it plans to raise prices this month due to the high cost of tariffs. The closing bell rang just moments ago. Here's a look at the Dow. It ticked up more than 270 points. Our interactive stock market heat map brought to you by FinViz. It shows the top 500 stocks. One major retailer actually fell today after announcing price hikes due to the tariffs. We'll have more on that coming up in the next half hour. But first, the Supreme Court considers President Trump's attempt to broadly enforce an order limiting birthright citizenship. The move would affect thousands of children born in the United States to non-citizen parents. Federal judges have blocked the directive nationwide, saying it is unconstitutional. Today, a number of state attorney generals spoke about the case. Let's take a listen.
Contrary to what the United States is saying, citizenship doesn't turn on or turn off when you cross state lines. Babies born in Philadelphia are subject to the same rights and privileges as babies born in New Jersey. And I have to say, it was astonishing to hear the United States government tell the 9 justices of the Supreme Court that they weren't sure whether they would follow binding court precedent. They weren't sure if they could concede that basic fact that is the underpinning of the rule of law in this nation. This case is about birthright citizenship, but it's about whether the rule of law and the constraints on the executive, and as Justice Jackson said, whether the president can act like a king.
CBS News chief legal correspondent Jan Crawford joining us live now outside the Supreme Court. So, Jan, this case is really more about the power of judges and nationwide injunctions. What have you heard from both sides?
Well, you know, once President Trump entered that executive order, kind of configuring the whole notion of birthright citizenship, people sued. And judges across the country, across the board, every single one of them ruled that it was blatantly unconstitutional. But 3 of those judges in Maryland, Massachusetts, and Washington State went a step further. And they said, you know, we're not just going to have this order applied to the parties in front of us. We're going to apply it nationwide to every single person in this country. And that's the issue in the Supreme Court today, whether or not those judges have the power to issue those so-called nationwide injunctions. Now, opponents say, opponents of the birthright citizenship, they say that it's absolutely essential. You heard from those attorneys generals. They say this is a case of national importance and you can't have different states with different rules. But critics of nationwide injunctions, and it's not a partisan issue. Democrats don't like it when the Democrats in the White House, they say that judges just don't have this power and that the Supreme Court has got to rein it in. You can't have one single judge dictating policy nationwide.
Can you break down what a favorable ruling for the Trump administration on this case could mean?
Yes, I mean, the justices, and I think a majority of the justices do want to end nationwide injunctions. They just aren't quite sure how they're going to get there, what that opinion would look like, what that kind of rule would look like. If they're able to do that, though, it would mean, in this case, that those injunctions would just apply to the parties who filed the lawsuits. And there's states that have filed the lawsuits, advocacy groups, citizens, but they wouldn't just apply to everyone in the whole country. And then if you're not in one of those 20-odd states or other advocacy groups, and that would cover a lot of people, then you would have to go and file your own lawsuit. And then courts would rule on that, and, you know, it would work its way up through the system. There was some concern that because of the unique nature of this case, that there could be a time when people could fall through the gaps. And that was a concern that troubled the justices, even those who seem to suggest they want to end nationwide injunctions.
So when could we expect a ruling in the case?
You know, I think this one is going to be difficult for them. I mean, they've got to figure out how they're going to write this opinion. There's going to be dissents. There's clearly not, you know, all 9 on the same page here. So that takes time. They like to finish things up by the end of June. That's when their term typically ends. So I would think we would hear something before then. But when, between now and then, who knows? It's anyone's guess.
All right, Jan Crawford. Jan, thank you. A Wisconsin judge has pleaded not guilty to helping a man evade federal immigration agents. CBS News Department of Justice correspondent Scott McFarland joining us live now from Milwaukee. So, Scott, what did you learn in court today?
It was a brief hearing, but what we saw and what we heard really spoke volumes about the significance of this case involving Judge Hannah Dugan. It was a pretty matter-of-fact arraignment hearing, the kind we see every day in federal courthouses. She sat next to her defense attorney. Her defense attorney spoke for her, entered a not guilty plea, and said that Judge Dugan would like to employ her speedy trial rights, wants a trial as soon as possible. And they set the trial date for July 21st. But you could see outside the courthouse this mass of protesters on the road behind me, by the hundreds, supporters of Judge Dugan, and you could hear them from inside the courtroom. They were so loud outside. Speaks to that this case is now so much bigger than just this one defendant, than just Judge Dugan. Her supporters are arguing this is about an encroachment of the executive branch onto an independent judge, a local judge. And that overstep, they argue, is what makes this so profoundly important.
So what can we expect next in this case?
Well, you have a trial date of July 21st. I wouldn't bet the mortgage the trial begins if there is a trial on July 21st. In the federal system, things have a way of slipping time-wise. There are going to be pre-trial motions filed. Judge Dugan has already filed a motion asking for this case's dismissal, saying judges like her enjoy a form of judicial immunity from prosecution for official acts they do inside their own courtrooms. The court's going to have to hash out what to make of that dismissal motion. Lots of ways for this to slide down the calendar, but this case is a unicorn. It is different from any we've ever seen, in part because it's a judge being prosecuted, but in part because the Trump administration has used a megaphone to announce this case. They posted a photo on social media of the FBI director's social media feed of the judge in handcuffs doing a perp walk. This is just different, which means in so many ways the road forward is unpredictable.
Happening now, what do we know about reports that Attorney General Pam Bondi sold shares in the company that owns Truth Social before the president announced tariffs April 2nd?
We're pressing the Department of Justice for answers to questions, specific questions about those reported transactions, which happened on that very pivotal day and that very pivotal week, that so-called Liberation Day, when the president announced all those new tariffs, some of which came as a surprise even to people who are close to this issue, close to the issue of tariffs. These could be political issues, optics issues for the Attorney General, but there's been no indication there's any investigation underway into any misconduct.
All right, Scott McFarland. Scott, thank you. A pivotal moment in the case against the man accused of killing 4 University of Idaho students. We are live in Boise as lawyers from both sides go head-to-head in court. That's next. You're watching CBS News 24/7. To New York now, where lawyers for Sean Diddy Combs question his ex-girlfriend Cassie Ventura in his sex trafficking trial. Ventura faces cross-examination following 2 days of her testimony. On the stand, she described years of alleged physical and sexual abuse by Combs. So CBS News legal reporter Katrina Kaufman joins us live outside the courthouse. So obviously there's a lot of cross-examination happening today. What happened? What came out of it? And what are we hearing from Ventura?
So there has been a very labored cross-examination going on of Cassie Ventura. The defense is saying that it will go through at least the end of the day tomorrow. The prosecution really wants her to stand at the end of this week. The defense earlier said they still had a lot to go through. To be honest, though, it's felt a little bit like they're missing the mark with her. There are a number of questions where they ask her about something, almost as though they think they might have a gotcha moment where she said something on the stand and they have something that didn't align somewhere else, and none of those are actually hitting. She's been a very strong witness with the way that she has carried herself, and she hasn't seemed to be caught off guard by any of it. In fact, there was one exhibit where the defense attorney asked her, she said, the prosecution prepared you with this exhibit, right? Because I think just the way that Cassie handled it, she assumed that she must have been. And Cassie said, no. But some of the testimony that we've been hearing is they're laying out how Cassie Ventura and Sean Combs did a lot of drugs together. In fact, they called each other get high partners. At one point, the defense attorney said to Cassie, you don't remember much from this time period. Miss Ventura, it appears that part of their strategy is to make it seem as though she was very drugged up during this period. Maybe her recollection of things is not accurate. They also are talking about how she did drugs with friends of hers. Sean Combs allegedly was upset about this. Cassie has affirmed that he didn't want her doing so many drugs at times, and sometimes that would make him really angry. It invoked some of these incidents of rage that we've heard about, and that testimony is still continuing behind me in the federal courthouse now.
All right, we'll continue to follow it. Katrina Kaufman. Katrina, thank you. Brian Kohberger, the man accused of killing 4 University of Idaho students back in 2022, appeared in court for his last scheduled appearance before the trial begins this summer. CBS News correspondent Jonathan Vigliotti joins us live from Boise, Idaho. So, Jonathan, this is a pre-trial hearing. What did we learn today?
Yeah, Juliet, it was a critical day for the defense. They left this hearing, though, with more work to do. They've long maintained that Brian Kohberger was not responsible for these murders, that there was, in their words, an alternative perpetrator. Last month during a hearing, a judge said he needed more evidence before he would allow that theory to be presented before a jury. Yesterday, the defense submitted that evidence. Today in this hearing, we were there as the judge reviewed it, saying it simply wasn't enough. He gave the defense an additional week or so to provide additional evidence that rose above what he described as speculation and allegations, saying that what he reviewed was quote unquote objectionable. Ultimately, this was an administrative hearing where the judge went through the rules of this trial. He focused a lot on public interest. We learned that court cameras will be allowed inside, filming live, posting a live stream online, and on top of that, the judge setting aside seating for public attendance, allowing the public to go online to reserve their seats ahead of time on a day-to-day basis. That's just how much public interest there is right now. Brian Kohberger, he faces 4 charges of first-degree murder. If he is found guilty, he faces the death sentence. Next up, we have jury selection. That's July 30th. Then follows the trial. That's August 11th. And we're told, Juliet, it could last 3 months into November with dozens of witnesses taking the stand.
All right, Jonathan Vigliotti. Jonathan, thank you. A mother accused of buying ammo and tactical gear for her son who was planning a mass attack at a school. What we know about this disturbing case out of Texas next. You're watching CBS News 24/7. The FAA says Denver Air Traffic Control lost communications for about 2 minutes Monday, but it was able to stay in contact with aircraft through a secondary frequency. So let's go to our breaking news correspondent, Chanel Call, in the CBS newsroom in New York. So, Chanel, what is the FAA saying caused this failure?
Right. So, Jules, the FAA, first of all, confirming today that there was, in fact, a 2-minute outage at the Denver Air Route Traffic Control Center. This apparently happened on Monday at about 5:50 p.m. local time. During a House Transportation Committee hearing this afternoon, Franklin McIntosh, who, by the way, is the FAA's deputy head of air traffic control, said that both the main and the backup frequencies failed for about 2 minutes on Monday afternoon. He also added, though, controllers then used another frequency to speak with and relay instructions to pilots who were in the air at the time. The FAA is saying, look, there was no impact to operations, but here's Democratic Congressman Robert Garcia responding to McIntosh's explanation of what happened on Monday.
Obviously, regardless of the time, anytime there's these outages, which are happening now, of course, more regularly, it's very concerning. And that reporting this morning adds to, I think, the concern of members of this committee. Now, we know that there are staffing and equipment problems at air traffic control. We know that the problems have gone back decades in some cases, but it's still an absolutely shocking system failure, and we need immediate solutions.
And so the FAA, Jules, is now investigating that particular incident on Monday. But, we should mention this comes during a big spike in outages or communication failures in recent weeks. A number of those incidents have happened at Newark Airport. I'm sure you've seen a reporting on this. And really, when I went to the airport over the weekend and spoke to people who were traveling, especially during Mother's Day weekend, people had said that it was sort of shaking public confidence in flying. In response to all of this, Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy said this past weekend that he now plans to essentially cut the number of flights, not just at Newark, but across the country over the next several weeks.
Yeah, the back-to-back reports have been a little alarming. All right, Chanel Call, thank you so much. A scary and disturbing story out of Texas. A mother charged with providing her son the means to carry out an attack on his middle school. Now, both are facing terrorism charges. CBS News national correspondent Janet Shamlian has more.
Parents at San Antonio's Rhodes Middle School are asking why Ashley Rosalindo Pardo would allegedly provide her son with everything he needed to carry out a potential lethal attack on his classmates.
What kind of mother is she to be supplying her children with that?
The boy, according to police, allegedly showed up at school Monday wearing a mask, camouflage jacket, and tactical pants, all provided by his mother, but then left shortly after. He was later arrested off campus. Police say the boy's grandmother reported him to law enforcement earlier in the day. According to an affidavit, she said she found him on Sunday hitting a live bullet with a hammer. He allegedly told her his mom gave him the ammunition and also bought him tactical gear. Investigators say before leaving for school, the child told his grandmother he was going to be famous. Later that morning, she alleges she searched his room, finding ammunition and an improvised explosive device wrapped with duct tape that referenced the 2019 New Zealand mosque shooting. Police say they've been aware of the boy since January, when school staff caught him with drawings that included a map of the school labeled suicide route. But when investigators questioned his mother, according to the affidavit, she did not feel concern for his behavior, later admitting she purchased her son's supplies, including ammo, in exchange for babysitting his younger siblings. Jail records indicate Pardo was released Tuesday on a bond of $75,000. Janet Shamlian, CBS News.
To New Jersey, where Newark Mayor Ross Baraka appeared in court for a status conference. This comes after he was arrested for trespassing outside an ICE facility last week. Now, Baraka says he was not there to protest, but to support members of New Jersey's congressional delegation who were touring the facility. Baraka says the facility does not have the necessary permits to operate. The Department of Justice has denied those allegations.
We believe that I was targeted in this. I was the only person arrested. I was the only person identified. I was the only person, they put in a cell. This is wrong. It is unjust. It is undemocratic. It is unpatriotic. It is un-American.
If convicted, the trespassing charge carries a maximum sentence of 30 days in prison. A possible rail strike could begin as soon as tomorrow, impacting more than 300,000 commuters in New Jersey and New York. The union representing the locomotive engineers is meeting with New Jersey Transit to try to get a deal done before the midnight deadline. The union has been at odds with the transit system over pay raises. The governor says everything is on the table, including declaring a state of emergency if engineers walk off the job. To Florida now, where a UPS driver is being called a hero after helping rescue 2 children who were accidentally locked inside their home.
I was just doing a delivery right here, and he was out here, kind of out here. And he has a 2-year-old and a 6-month-year-old in here. The front door's locked. I just was able to check the garage to see this opened up.
Can't get in the house?
Can't get in the house.
Amazing. So this is police body camera video. It shows the moment the driver, who police identified as Mr. Perez, tells police a 2-year-old and a 6-month-old were inside the home. The officer enters the garage and kicks through a locked door. And that is when the officer, the delivery driver, and the children's guardian ran inside.
You okay?
Yes. You're welcome. You're welcome. You okay?
Thank you.
Police say the 2 children were not hurt. On to some major wildfires we're following, burning in both Arizona and Minnesota. The Greer fire in Arizona, it started as a 10-acre wildfire late Tuesday morning. It has grown to more than 7,000 acres since then, and containment is at 0%. Meanwhile, firefighters in Minnesota have 3 fires to put out. The Camp House fire burned nearly 15,000 acres with 0 containment, despite the hard work from firefighters on the ground. Officials believe that fire began after a group of campers left a fire pit unattended. The Jenkins Creek fire exploded to more than 15,000 acres, 0 containment to report there. And the smallest of the 3 also growing overnight, the Munger Shaw fire. It grew to 1,700 acres. Evacuations were ordered for people living along Shaw Road. All right, let's get to a live look now in Minneapolis. The Twin Cities are under threat of severe storms this evening, bringing the chance of large hail and damaging winds. Meteorologist Jessica Birch is tracking the storm.
Widespread throughout all the upper Midwest. Right now, we're gearing up for some active weather today, which is wild to think these are the exact same areas dealing with red flag warnings just a few days ago. Now, this area of low pressure will bring in heavy storms. We could see a chance for tornadoes stretching anywhere from Milwaukee all the way over into Chicago into the coming days. And then these storms track to the south, all the way over into areas like the Tennessee Valley and the Ohio Valley right around the corner, also bringing in severe weather, too. So let's take a look behind me. I want to kind of time this out and show you over 87 million people are gearing up for severe weather this afternoon alone. And we keep a close eye on this for a couple reasons. We could see hail, we could see lightning. Of course, we're also concerned about flash flooding with some of the stronger storms that bring in rain throughout all these regions. This stretches from Minnesota over the state of Wisconsin, pushing into the Great Lakes as we head into our evening hours tonight, early morning hours tomorrow. That starts to track off into the northeast with severe weather expected there. Now we head a little bit more south now that we're into our Friday forecast. In the morning hours, we're going to watch those storms start to gain some strength. We could see hail, we could see lightning. Of course, I just mentioned that flash flooding is possible too throughout that region. So today alone, that severe weather outlook stretches across all these states, all the way up into the Great Lakes, stretching all the way down into the Ohio Valley too. We could see tornadoes into this afternoon in big populated areas, Chicago, close to that region. And then on top of that, damaging winds are still possible too. We could see large hail stretched all the way down to southern portions of Kentucky, northern portions of Tennessee. And as we head into our forecast tomorrow, heading into this weekend's forecast, that storm tilts just a little bit to the south, and we'll continue to keep a close eye on states like Missouri, southern Illinois, and northern parts of Tennessee, too. Back to you.
The Supreme Court hearing arguments today on President Trump's order to end birthright citizenship. It is the concept that anyone born here is a citizen. It all stems from a 1898 Supreme Court decision and a boy from San Francisco's Chinatown. CBS News Bay Area's Kevin Coe talked to his great-grandson, who is unexpectedly carrying on his family's legacy.
Norman Wong had to wait until the 80s before he learned his family history was intertwined with American history.
My place in the world has changed because I have a famous great-great-grandfather, and he really did make a difference by willing to fight the system.
Norman Wong is the great-grandson of Wong Kim Ark, born in 1873 in San Francisco. He was denied re-entry after a visit to China, sued the U.S., arguing the 14th Amendment guaranteed his citizenship, and won. That fight still runs in Norman's bloodline more than a century later.
His efforts actually validated my life to some extent.
The 1898 Supreme Court decision set the precedent for birthright citizenship. This year, President Trump issued an executive order with the aim of putting an end to the practice as it stands.
He signed an order that will end birthright citizenship for the children of illegal aliens. Because it wasn't meant for these children.
The Trump administration argues the 14th Amendment has been interpreted incorrectly and far too broadly. It's a sentiment for Norman that doesn't sit well.
We need to get America on the right track where people care for each other. If we're going to live as a people, we're going to die as one people. And it's up to us.
Civil rights attorney Annie Lee is the managing director of policy at the CAA in Chinatown.
Birthright citizenship is something we take for granted. It's been the law of the land for over 100 years. And everyone thought it was settled because it's very clear in the 14th Amendment.
She says the executive order has no legal basis, but believes some damage has already been done.
Even if it loses in the courts, what you have done is you have instilled fear in the community. You have signaled to, H-1B visa holders that you're not actually welcome here, even though you can work here right now. You shouldn't see a future for yourself here.
Recently, San Francisco officials held a ceremony outside the apartment where Wong Kim Ark lived in Chinatown to commemorate his landmark Supreme Court case 127 years ago. Now, his 74-year-old great-grandson is unexpectedly picking up where he left off.
I feel, I don't know, maybe his energy runs through me too, but I also feel the energy of all these people that support me to bring out what I say for the sake of this country and my posterity. Let's get it right.
Kevin Coe, CBS News, Bay Area.
Tensions escalate in the latest effort to end the war in Ukraine, but with Russia's Vladimir Putin a no-show, could a deal be made? That's next. You're watching CBS News 24/7. On Turkey, where anticipated peace talks between Russia and Ukraine are missing two key players, Russian President Vladimir Putin and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Now, Zelensky arrived in Turkey prepared for talks with Putin, but Putin didn't show. Trump reacted to Putin's absence on his way to the United Arab Emirates.
Look, nothing's going to happen until Putin and I get together, okay? And obviously he wasn't going to go. He was going to go, but he thought I was going to go. He wasn't going if I wasn't there. And I don't believe anything's going to happen, whether you like it or not, until he and I get together. But we're going to have to get it solved because too many people are dying.
Russia and Ukraine traded insults ahead of the planned meeting, which would mark the first direct peace talks between the countries in more than 3 years. Russian officials called Zelensky, quote, pathetic for challenging Putin to show up in person. And Zelensky slammed Russia for sending a, quote, decorative delegation to talks.
President Zelensky, Sky News, do you have a message for Vladimir Putin?
I'm here. I think this is very clear message.
So let's bring in CBS News White House reporter Willie James Inman. Willie, is there still time for these leaders to come to the table? And if they don't, could any progress still be made?
Hey there, Jules. Good to be with you. Well, the White House is holding out a hope that these leaders that are there in Turkey, I should say, from the Ukraine side and the Russian side, can have a breakthrough. That is, in fact, what Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who is also traveling in the region, said a little while ago. The president, as you played there, commented aboard Air Force One on his way to the United Arab Emirates. Now, there was talk, potentially. The president alluded to this himself earlier in the week, that he could potentially go to Turkey as well to help broker this type of deal. It's unclear as to whether or not that will happen. But Secretary of State Marco Rubio had this to say a little bit earlier. Listen.
Well, we haven't been chasing this around the world anymore. I mean, that's already happened. We came because we were told that I was going to be here anyways, obviously, but we came because we were told that there might be a direct engagement between the Russians and the Ukrainians. That was originally the plan. You all heard the same thing. That was not to be the case, or if it is, it's not at the levels we had hoped it would be at. I hope I'm wrong. I hope they have tremendous breakthrough tomorrow if they talk. But I frankly do not believe that we're going to have a breakthrough here until President Trump sits face to face with President Putin and determines what his intentions are moving forward.
Now, as I mentioned, it's unclear if President Trump will somehow take part in an in-person meeting with President Putin or President Zelensky. Remember, the president met President Zelensky on the sidelines of the Pope's funeral several weeks ago, so at least they have had that in-person conversation. That has yet to happen with the Russians, although U.S. officials have been meeting with the Russian sides, including a meeting with President Putin himself to come to help broker some type of agreement between these two nations. But the president himself and the Secretary of State saying that they won't be able to bring it across the finish line until Trump himself shows up for a meeting with President Putin and other leaders.
So, Willie, the United Arab Emirates is the final stop of his Middle East tour. So what's coming out of this leg of the trip, and then what is next for the president?
Yeah, well, this trip for the president has really been about making deals. The White House has pushed forward fact sheets and press releases outlining the major deals that the president has been able to help broker with these countries, including the United Arab Emirates as well. The president is there in Abu Dhabi, the country's capital. Essentially, what is happening on this leg of the trip includes a $200 billion U.S. UAE deal that includes a deal for oil and natural gas that benefits companies based in the United States like ExxonMobil and companies based in the UAE as well. There's also an AI infrastructure agreement that would call for some $1.4 trillion in U.S. and UAE investments over the next 10 years. This is something that has really been a focus for this nation in particular, especially when it comes to artificial intelligence, those computer chips, those data centers that you really need to be able to process all the data that you need for running artificial intelligence. That's been a focus for the UAE and for the United States as well. So this is a deepening partnership, one that is a multi-year partnership, and one that the president and the White House can tout and say, look, we've gotten these billions of dollars worth of deals from these three nations. This is only the beginning of the administration, the second administration for President Trump, and this is certainly something that the White House is going to promote as a success following the completion of the president's trip. He is headed back here to the White House tomorrow, but before that, before he takes off from the UAE, he will have a breakfast meeting with business leaders there in the region, Jules.
All right, Willie James Inman, thank you so much. All right, to Wall Street now. The closing bell rang just 30 minutes ago. So here's a look at the Dow. It ticked up more than 270 points. We head over to our interactive stock market heat map. This is brought to you by FinViz, always showing the top 500 stocks. And we're watching as investors react to new inflation data and a warning from Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell about the possibility of higher long-term interest rates.
Many estimates of the longer-run level of the policy rate have risen, including those in the Summary of Economic Projections. Higher real rates may also reflect the possibility that inflation could be more volatile going forward than during the inter-crisis period of the 2010s. We may be entering a period of more frequent and potentially more persistent supply shocks, a difficult challenge for the economy and for central banks.
Okay, let's bring in CBS News business contributor Javier David. Javier, you are certainly fluent in the language of the Fed. Walk us through what Powell was saying here and how markets reacted.
Yeah, look, what the Fed chair is hinting at here is kind of the practical consequences of walking away from globalization and these speed bumps that lie ahead. It's been unfolding for a while, but the administration's sort of tariff offensive has made it official and kind of concentrated in mind. So namely, we just can't rely on the unfettered movement of goods and services across borders like we have over the last several decades. Free trade as we know it has kind of fallen out of favor, and it provokes a lot of logjams in the global supply chain that puts upward pressure on prices. It just means goods and services made and shipped from abroad are going to be harder to source, and it's going to be more likely they're going to be more expensive at the point of sale for consumers.
All right, sometimes we look at certain companies. Let's take Walmart, for instance, today. The stock fell. What is going on there?
Yeah, look, Walmart today said the obvious. To put it bluntly, tariffs or taxes, they raise costs on companies, and whenever that happens, companies will pass them along to consumers. And the producer price data that we got today was also a hint of that. It was a perfect example. Headline prices fell, but corporate margins shrank, mainly because companies started eating these higher costs associated with tariffs. So to be fair, Walmart really tried to hold the line for a very long time in this era of inflation that we're suffering through on price hikes, mainly because they cater to lower and middle income consumers. But these efforts are basically running headfirst into reality. And these are just the wages of whipsawing, of the confusion of on again, off again trade policy. That's just basically chaos for businesses to plan. And even when you switch the tariffs off temporarily, you still have to prepare for higher costs.
Javier David, appreciate your insight. Thank you so much.
Sure.
The FBI says scammers stole a record $16.6 billion through internet crimes like identity theft and online impersonation last year. That is a 33% jump from the year before. But many Americans have no idea how much of their personal data is already visible online or what to do about it. Our CBS News Confirmed team has some tips to help you delete your personal information online. Here is Alex Clark with more.
Nearly everything you do online leaves behind a trail of data. They're like little breadcrumbs. So we're using an example named Tina today, and these breadcrumbs that she's leaving behind represents the data that she's left while browsing online. So what happens is behind the scenes, your data gets collected by what's called data brokers. They may sell your data to advertisers, political organizations, and even to people finder sites. She doesn't want that, so here's how she can try to stop that. First, Tina can investigate her digital trail. She can go to Google her name, username, and addresses to see what comes up. And Google also has a new tool called Results About You that will do this automatically if you trust them. And she can also use a website that searches for her history using her email, so that's another option. These are her search results that she finds. So first off, there's an old MySpace page. Second, there's a Facebook album with a wild party on it. Next, her full address is listed on a People Finder site, and her phone number is listed on a colleague's resume. So how can she clean this all up? Our first tip is to delete any accounts you don't want to appear anymore. So does she really need this old MySpace page? No, delete it. Next, let's take a look at this social album. When she logs into Facebook, she's going to look for the 3 dots in the album. And when she selects that, she can go to edit her privacy settings. She'll select friends so that strangers can no longer see these. Next, there's a People Finder website that has Tina's address on it. And most of these sites have what's called an opt-out page. So she's going to go there and see if she can get her data removed. Some services will do it for you, but there's no guarantee that it's gone for good. So now we've cleaned up most of Tina's data, but there's still one thing left: the resume, her number on a colleague's resume. And this wasn't even in her control. She was listed as a reference for someone, which is something that's easy to forget about. So how can you tackle those? What she's going to want to do is limit how often she gives her name and address online, use unique, secure passwords, and make sure that her connections are secure. Just look for the S and the lock in the bar. Lastly, she's going to discuss her data goals with friends and family. She asks her friend to remove that number, problem solved.
Good information. This just in. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis just signed a bill making his state the second to ban fluoride from its water system. State lawmakers approved the bill last month after studies showed a link between high levels of fluoride and lower IQ in children. But dentists and health advocates are concerned with the move because normal levels of fluoride are important to dental health. DeSantis says adding fluoride to the water supply is like forcing medication on people. As the federal government looks to cut spending, the latest program on the chopping block is the popular Energy Star program. And as CBS News correspondent Nancy Chen explains, the EPA-run program saves qualifying American households hundreds of dollars every year.
With all the cuts the Trump administration is making to government agencies, the EPA is now proposing to end the Energy Star program. So even if you don't know the program, you've likely seen that Energy Star label on refrigerators, air conditioners, washing machines, even buildings. So here's how the program works. Companies can enroll, and if their product meets EPA efficiency standards, they can display the logo. It's an easy way for buyers to know they're going to save money on energy costs. And they have saved. Since it launched more than 3 decades ago, Energy Star has helped Americans cut back on 5 trillion kilowatt hours of energy. That is the equivalent of powering New York City for 100 years, a whole century. It also saves the average household about $450 every year. The program has had widespread bipartisan support and calls itself one of the most successful voluntary U.S. government programs in history. President Trump tried to kill this program in his first term, but that effort failed after more than 1,000 companies protested. Similarly, this time, hundreds of companies like Samsung and National Grid have signed a letter in support of Energy Star. It's unclear whether the program, though, can be ended without a new act from Congress. Nancy Chen, CBS News, New York.
Consumers can still look for Energy Guide, that yellow sticker which accompanies and compares energy cost and consumption on appliances like dishwashers, freezers, and water heaters. But it's not as comprehensive as Energy Star, and it is not a certification. Rock megastar Bruce Springsteen not holding back when it comes to his opinion about President Donald Trump. Next, you're watching CBS News 24/7. Music legend Bruce Springsteen kicked off his tour by blasting the Trump administration on stage. Springsteen and the E Street Band are taking their Land of Hopes and Dreams tour across Europe. And during last night's concert in Manchester, England, Springsteen called the Trump administration treasonous.
There's some very weird, strange, and dangerous going on out there. In America, they are persecuting people for using their right to free speech and voicing their dissent. This is happening now. In America, the richest men are taking satisfaction in abandoning the world's poorest children to sickness and death.
A Ben & Jerry's co-founder was among multiple protesters arrested and thrown out of a Capitol Hill hearing yesterday. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was giving an opening statement when protesters started getting vocal. The CBS News team posted that moment on TikTok.
Budget I'm presenting today supports these goals and reflects.
The witness will suspend. The committee will come to order. Capitol Police are asked to remove the individuals from the hearing room. Members of the audience are reminded disruptions will not be tolerated. Members of the audience are reminded disruptions will not be permitted while the committee conducts its business. Capitol Police are asked to remove the individuals from the hearing room.
The man in the gray suit being escorted out was Ben & Jerry's co-founder Ben Cohen. Cohen was charged with a misdemeanor. He says he was protesting military aid to Israel and Medicaid cuts. And multiple lawmakers were caught getting some shut-eye during a marathon House committee hearing that stretched on for about 20 hours. Just before 5 a.m. Wednesday, Utah Republicans' Blake Moore was supposed to cast his vote on a reconciliation bill when this happened.
Mrs. Fischbach. Mrs. Fischbach, no. Mr. Moore. Mr. Moore. Mr. Moore, no.
So the House Ways and Means Committee held that hearing to advance a sweeping tax package on Trump's agenda. It ended up lasting about 20 hours. He wasn't the only one. Michigan Representative Debbie Dingell was seen leaning back with her eyes closed. She reposted that video on social media, writing that she had been up for 31 hours straight fighting Republicans trying to gut Medicaid. She added that she closed her eyes to think about an America where everyone has access to quality, affordable health care. Our social team has more great content like this on TikTok and Instagram, so please follow us at the handle CBS News. A major deal in the sporting goods world announced today, with Dick's buying Foot Locker for almost $2.5 billion. Dick's expects the deal to close in the second half of the year. The deal still needs approval from Foot Locker shareholders. America Decides with Major Garrett is next. Washington State's Attorney General will join him live to talk about President Trump's effort to end birthright citizenship. He's among the dozens of other states fighting back against the order. We leave you now with a live look at Capitol Hill, where the House is moving forward with President Trump's so-called Big Beautiful Bill. 3 committees voted to advance some of the most contentious parts of the major budget package aimed at addressing the president's defense, energy, and tax priorities. You're watching CBS News 24/7. America Decides is up next.